The United States presidents and the Jews, from the first to the last, from George Washington through Donald Trump, the American presidents have proven themselves to be friends of their Jewish citizens of the United States and Jews around the world. George Washington, the father of our nation, famous for saying, "To bigotry, no sanction, to persecution, no assistance." On the morning of August 17th, 1790, George Washington arrived in Newport, Rhode Island, accompanied by many distinguished heads of the United States, including United States Supreme Court Justice John Blair. A few days after leaving Newport, the president wrote to the citizen groups who had addressed him at Newport. First among them was his letter to the Jews. More than simple courtesy, the letter reflected the policy of the new government toward those whose religious beliefs were perceived as different. Washington's letter was sent on August 21st, 1790, and he wrote, "May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid." Our second president, John Adams, what were his thoughts of the Jews? A number of years after he left office, he had the most loving and gracious words to say about the Jewish people. "The Jews are the most glorious nation that ever inhabited this earth. The Romans and their empire were but a bauble in comparison of the Jews. They have given religion to 3/4 of the globe and have influenced the affairs of mankind more and more happily than any other nation, ancient or modern." We all recognize this president, President Abraham Lincoln, most renowned for freeing the black slaves of the United States, but he is less well known for being a friend of the Jews. He personally had several Jewish friends. What was the character of Abraham Lincoln that impelled him to help the downtrodden of the United States? Here's a letter he wrote many years before he became president, when he was a lawyer and he was approached by a potential client. Here's how he responded to the client's inquiry. "Dear sir, yes, we can doubtless gain your case for you. We can set a whole neighborhood at loggerheads. We can distress a widowed mother and her 6 fatherless children, and thereby get you $600, to which you seem to have a legal claim, but which rightfully belongs, it appears to me, as much to the woman and her children as it does to you. You must remember that some things legally right are not morally right. We shall not take your case, but will give you a little advice, for which we will charge you nothing. You seem to be a sprightly, energetic man. We would advise you to try your hand at making $600 in some other way. Most sincerely yours, A. Lincoln." As president, what did President Lincoln do? After the Civil War had broken out, he was petitioned by some Jews of the United States to allow Jews to become chaplains in the United States Army, because in the near century of the United States, there had never been a Jewish chaplain. And here is the actual charter signed by President Lincoln, in which he appointed the first Jewish chaplain of the United States Army. During the war in 1862, General Ulysses S. Grant had been given false reports of Jews trading against the United States, and he issued his infamous order stating as follows: the Jews as a class, violating every regulation of trade established by the Treasury Department and also department orders, are hereby expelled from the department being the area in Tennessee and Kentucky and elsewhere controlled by General Grant. And this reflected the first and only time Jews have been expelled from any place in the United States. And Grant's men began to carry out the order with alacrity. Jews were singled out and given notice to leave without delay. One group in Holly Springs was even refused transportation and had to trudge 40 miles to Memphis on foot. When one of the group tried to telegraph Grant's headquarters for confirmation of the order, he was clapped into jail and forced to stay overnight. Bad as the order was, General Grant had meant it to apply only to Jewish cotton speculators following the army. Instead, Captain Marshall Wardell set about to remove from Paducah, Kentucky, every Jewish man, woman, and child living there. Terse official notices were dispatched to the 30 or so Jewish heads of families, commanding them to leave the city of Paducah, Kentucky within 24 hours after this order. Hurriedly, these people locked up their homes and embarked on a river steamer going up the Ohio River to Cincinnati, almost abandoning a baby in the pandemonium. Only 2 sick women were allowed to stay behind. But to their everlasting credit, the Jews of Paducah refused to submit humbly to their fate. A group of Paducah's Jewish merchants dispatched an indignant telegram to President Lincoln, condemning the order as an enormous outrage on all law and humanity, and begging for the president's immediate interposition. They also took steps to communicate with the larger Jewish congregations up the Ohio River to publicize the affair and to send emissaries directly to Washington seeking revocation of the order. Caesar Caskell arrived in Washington on January 3rd. Along with Congressman John Gurley of Cincinnati, the 2 men went to the White House, where Caskell related his story to the president. Lincoln's initial disbelief turned to amazement when shown a copy of General Orders Number 11, issued by General Grant, along with the written order for Caskell's dismissal from Paducah. The president's response was unhesitating. Instantly, he forwarded a handwritten countermand note to Chief of the Army Henry Halleck. And here we see President Lincoln's handwritten note. Halleck's order went out to Grant the next day. A paper purporting to be General Orders Number 11, issued by you December 17th, has been presented here. By its terms, it expels all Jews from your department. If such an order has been issued, it will be immediately revoked. And here we see the actual written order of revocation of General Order Number 11. President Lincoln later went to some pains to explain his feelings when the Jewish delegations from Louisville and Cincinnati finally arrived. President Lincoln reiterated how astonished he had been to learn of the order and stated his belief that to condemn a class is, to say the least, to wrong the good with the bad. I do not like to hear a class or nationality condemned on account of a few sinners. He added, that he felt no prejudice against Jews himself and would not tolerate it in others. And what of General Grant? Later, he became president himself. And what did he do with respect to General Order number 11? Well, certainly, as he was campaigning for president, he engendered a lot of enmity from the Jewish citizens. One stated, "Is this country the most boasted home of the free? Can it now be truthfully stated that America is the asylum of the oppressed?" One editorial stated, "The day of reckoning will surely come. Ulysses S. Grant is a marked man." Here we see a political cartoon. General Grant comparing him when he was the general in 1862 and later as president in 1882. With the 1868 election behind him, Grant permitted a private letter he had penned concerning General Orders number 11 to be released to the press. "I do not pretend to sustain the order. The order was issued and sent without any reflection and without thinking of the Jews as a sect or race. I have no prejudice against sect or race, but want each individual to be judged by his own merit." So, with these lofty words, what did General Grant actually do with respect to the Jews while he was president? In fact, one of Grant's first acts as president was the appointment of Simon Wolf, a leading Jewish attorney and B'nai B'rith leader, to the position of recorder of deeds. Soon, Wolf became the president's primary advisor on Jewish affairs. Thanks to him, the president made numerous other Jewish appointments, more probably than all previous presidents combined. Grant made history on June 9, 1876, when he became the first American president to attend the dedication of a synagogue. Timed to coincide with the celebration of 100 years of American independence, the president's appearance at Washington's Adass Israel synagogue was particularly laden with symbolism, in effect announcing that Judaism was a co-equal religion in the United States. The president also handed in a pledge card promising the congregation $10, approximately $200 today, earning him the community's sincere thanks for his munificence and liberality. Looking back some 40 years later, Grant's friend, Simon Wolf, who knew every American president from James Buchanan to Woodrow Wilson, concluded that President Grant did more on behalf of American citizens of Jewish faith at home and abroad than all the presidents of the United States prior thereto or since. So here we see a president with a conscience. Having made a grave mistake as a general during the Civil War, he more than made up for it as president decades later with respect to his actions with the Jewish citizens of the United States. Warren G. Harding, what was he known for with respect to the Jews? He was elected president in 1920, and as we know, during the fury of the First World War, Great Britain issued the Balfour Declaration in 1917, pledging that Palestine would be a Jewish homeland for the Jews of the world. 5 years later, President Harding issued a proclamation. America approves Jewish homeland in Palestine. And here we see from the New York Times, September 22nd, 1922, Harding signs Palestine motion. President Harding signed today the joint resolution adopted by the Senate and House expressing American approval of the restoration of Palestine as a Jewish homeland. So the United States joined Great Britain in a pledge to make Palestine a homeland for the homeless Jews of the world. President Harding expressed support for a Jewish home in Palestine, stating, "It is impossible for one who has studied at all the service of the Hebrew people to avoid the faith that they will one day be restored to their historic national home, and there enter on a new and yet greater phase of their contribution to the advance of humanity." This joint resolution of both houses of Congress unanimously endorsed the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, confirming the irrevocable right of Jews to settle in the area of Palestine, anywhere between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. President Harry Truman has gone down in history as one of the greatest friends of the Jewish people, both at home and abroad. What was it in his background that impelled him to become a friend of the Jewish people? Harry Truman was in the U.S. Army and he was sent overseas during World War I, the head of an artillery battalion. One of the men under his command was Eddie Jacobson, a Jew from the United States. They became fast friends during their time in Europe and pledged that they would go into business together if they returned home safely. They did, and they entered into business as a haberdashery in their home state of Missouri. Unfortunately, it went out of business during one of the financial panics. But little known to Eddie Jacobson, Harry Truman had a destiny to become president. In 1947 and 1948, when there was a question of whether or not the United Nations would establish Palestine as a Jewish homeland, and when there was a question afterwards, as the British were ready to move out, if the United States would recognize the new state of Israel, Harry Truman was bombarded by people on both sides of the issue, some urging him to recognize Israel, some urging him to do just the opposite. Finally, he barred everybody from the White House from discussing this matter with him, except his friend of many decades, Eddie Jacobson, came knocking on the door, and President Truman let him in. And he said, "Eddie, in all the time I've been president, never once have you asked for anything. Why are you here?" And Eddie Jacobson said, "Mr. President, if only you would speak with Chaim Weizmann, I think you would want to listen to what he had to say." And President Truman agreed to this meeting. And he had very kind words afterwards, saying, "I met Dr. Weizmann. He spelled his name Chaim, and I couldn't pronounce it, so I called him Cham, and he liked it." And President Truman and Chaim Weizmann became very close and good friends. Chaim Weizmann presented a Torah to President Truman, and President Truman determined to recognize the new state of Israel. And here we see May 14th, 1948. After the state of Israel was declared, President Truman, in less than 15 minutes, issued a proclamation on behalf of the United States of America recognizing Israel. It stated, "This government has been informed that a Jewish state has been proclaimed in Palestine, and recognition has been requested by the provisional government thereof. The United States recognizes the provisional government as the de facto authority of the new state of Israel." Other presidents after Truman had kind things to say about Jews of the world. President Eisenhower in 1957 stated, our forces saved the remnant of the Jewish people of Europe for a new life and a new hope in the reborn land of Israel. Along with all men of goodwill, I salute the young state and wish it well. President Richard Nixon. Some think of him as someone who was against the Jews because of some statements he made in private. But when the crunch time came, he proved himself to be one of the greatest presidential friends of the Jewish people. He has stated, Americans admire a people who can scratch a desert and produce a garden. The Israelis have shown qualities that Americans identify with: guts, patriotism, idealism, a passion for freedom. I have seen it. I know. I believe that. President Nixon stands out among presidents for taking the boldest risk for Israel, a much needed arms airlift during the 1973 Yom Kippur War, an astonishing 567 missions by American aircraft kept Israel fighting. Nixon ignored the counsel of his closest advisor, Henry Kissinger, who wanted to allow the war to play out for a while longer. To demonstrate how much Israel was up against, 100 Israeli tanks faced over 1,400 Syrian tanks. Closer to the Suez Canal, a mere 436 Israeli infantry were poised to fight over 80,000 Egyptian soldiers. This even after Israel's military buildup. The attacks by Egypt and Syria were backed by 9 Arab states, as well as 1 non-Arab state, the Soviet Union. The Nixon administration initiated Operation Nickelgrass, an American airlift to replace all of Israel's lost munitions. This was huge. Plane load after plane load of supplies literally allowed munitions and materiel to seemingly respawn for the Israeli counter effort. 567 missions were flown throughout the airlift, dropping over 22,000 tons of supplies. An additional 90,000 tons of materiel were delivered by sea. And what impelled President Nixon to do all this for Israel when he was generally thought of as someone who was not a friend of the Jews? There's a story that is told that at 3 o'clock in the morning, the hotline rang and it was Prime Minister Golda Meir of Israel, shortly after the war had started, imploring President Nixon to send much needed arms to Israel. As a young boy, President Nixon had been read Bible stories by his mother. And his mother told him when he was very young, she said, Richard, someday you will be in a position to save the Jewish people. And when that happens, you must make every effort to help save the Jewish people. And when President Nixon heard the grandmotherly Prime Minister Golda Meir of Israel on the telephone, her voice hearkened him back decades to his mother's admonition, telling him when he was in a position to help the Jewish people and save the Jewish people, he must do everything in his power to do so. And that's exactly what he did by providing the arms needed by Israel in order to stave off defeat and, in fact, turn it to victory in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. Here's what President Nixon said immediately after he spoke to Golda Meir. You get the stuff to Israel. Now, now. In June 1974, mired in the darkness of Watergate, just weeks before he would be the first president to resign, Nixon became the first president to visit Israel on the job. He said, "During the period that I have served as President of the United States, we have been through some difficult times together. And I can only say that the friendship that we have for this nation, the respect and the admiration we have for the people of this nation, their courage, their tenacity, their firmness in the face of very great odds, is one that makes us proud to stand with Israel." And what of our current president, President Donald J. Trump? He said in a speech at the Israel Museum in 2017, "I make this promise to you. My administration will always stand with Israel." And President Trump, famous for promises made, promises kept, did not state mere idle words, but kept his promise. And what was it that impelled him to do so much for the Jewish people? President Trump's father, Fred Trump, was a successful realtor and noted philanthropist who gave generously to Jewish causes. One of his friends said, "Fred Trump was so active in Jewish and Israeli causes that some believed that he belonged to the Jewish faith." Later, Fred Trump Jr., Donald's older brother, joined a Jewish fraternity, Sigma Alpha Mu, while attending Lehigh University, even though he was not Jewish. President Trump's daughter, Ivanka, converted to Judaism in 2009 before marrying Jared Kushner, an Orthodox Jew. Ivanka always stressed that her father supported her decision to convert from day one, adding that he has tremendous respect for the Jewish religion. And President Trump is blessed with 3 Jewish grandchildren. Donald Trump Jr. was married to model Vanessa K. Hayden, who is reported to be of Jewish and Danish descent. They have 5 children. Another son, Eric Trump, married Laura Lee Yunaska, also reported to be Jewish, under a crystal-embellished chuppah. They have 2 children. President Trump stated in 2017, "I was just told I'm the first active president who's been to the Western Wall, and that's a great honor. I was just told that. That to me is a great honor, and thank you very much." And here we see President Trump wearing a yarmulke and his daughter Ivanka doing the time-honored tradition of slipping notes and prayers into the crevices of the Western Wall, the only remaining remnant of the Second Holy Temple of Jerusalem. President Trump issued his statement on Jerusalem on December 6, 2017. In this he stated, in 1995, Congress adopted the Jerusalem Embassy Act, urging the federal government to relocate the American embassy to Jerusalem and to recognize that that city, and so importantly, is Israel's capital. Yet for over 20 years, every previous American president has exercised the law's waiver, refusing to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem or to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. Therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. While previous presidents have made this a major campaign promise, they failed to deliver. Today, I am delivering. And finally, President Trump issued a proclamation on recognizing the Golan Heights as part of the State of Israel on March 25, 2019. Now, therefore, I, Donald J. Trump, President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim that the United States recognizes that the Golan Heights are part of the state of Israel. We hope you have enjoyed this tour of the presidency and how we see from the very first president, George Washington, to our current president, Donald J. Trump, the Jewish people have been in their hearts and their souls, and they have done many great things for the Jews of America and Israel and the world.